Middle-aged, I live in Middle England and earn a middling salary, writing travel books and teaching geography at Oxford University. My life is extremely comfortable, or rather it was. It all changed when I started writing about the world's most extreme environments. The more I suffered in these godforsaken places,
the more I saw that it's the hostile landscapes that have shaped man's existence on Earth. One of the most hostile is the vast area that has kept East and West apart. Crossable only via the network of trading routes known as the Silk Road, this wilderness of mountains, plateaus and deserts is one of the least populated on Earth. But life is sustained there. Just what sort of life, my publisher felt was up to me to find out. This is the Badain-Jiran Sand Sea, 49,000 square kilometers, and one of the bleakest but most beautiful parts of the Gobi Desert. I had an appointment to meet an eccentric Austrian at the edge of the Badain-Jiran. He's the only European ever to have walked across this ocean of sand and had nearly died doing it. He was going to try and take me to one of the very few people who actually live there, a hardy soul called Lao Gao. It was January, and before I got to the dunes, I knew I'd need to acclimatize to life in a freezing winter desert, so I planned to cross the Gobi from north to south. I started my journey at Altai in Mongolia, on the Gobi's northern fringe. Altai is a bizarre mix of old and new, heavy industry next door to suburbs filled with the circular gares of recently settled ex-nomads. But for the jeeps, you could have been looking at an encampment of Genghis Khan's followers. My guide, Aldra, lost no time in getting me down to the market to stock up on the necessary cold weather gear.
You can try it.
Oh, so it's a double boot.
Yeah, double boot. Yeah.
Oh yes, that immediately feels much warmer.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, big stomach.
None of that.
The vast sheepskin dell is traditionally secured with a sash. Aldra considered a lucky length for a man to be 9 meters.
9 meters?
Yes, 9 meters.
I'm not that fat.
It was good to have the monster coat, but I couldn't help feeling that I wasn't going to be using it much on the first leg. 500 miles by road south to the Chinese border. However, I was wrong about that. Aldra, who had lived all his life in the Gobi, apart from a spell in the Mongolian parachute regiment, had a unique approach to Gobi transport.
Nick, now we are in the Mongolian Gobi. There is no people, there is no house. I'll teach you how to survive in Mongolian Gobi. We use Mongolian traditional way.
Aldra had obviously decided his mission wasn't to make my life easy.
This is it, into the Gobi, and it's extraordinarily cold. But believe it or not, I've been looking forward to this for some time, because I've been here in the summer and it's plus 30, 40 degrees C. And now it must be at least minus 20. And I'm actually having trouble speaking because my jaw is freezing up.
Even swathed head to toe in dead animals, after 4 hours on this freezing motorbike, I was looking forward to warming up at some wayside inn. But Aldra was having none of that.
We're gonna sleep outside tonight.
Sleep outside?
Yes.
What, in a tent?
No tent. We use Mongolian traditional way.
It's going to be extremely cold, isn't it?
It's about minus 25, maybe more.
Yeah, that's what I mean, extremely cold, we'll die.
Yeah.
Not only were there no tents, there was precious little else on Aldra's bike.
Is this it?
Yes.
Aldra said we needed to collect firewood and stones. And my concerns about an al fresco night in this temperature increased when I came across the frozen remains of a horse.
It's Gobi Desert. Difficult to survive.
Now we fill, huh?
Aldra's solution to the cold was a sort of primitive night storage heater.
Yes.
Okay.
The brushwood was ignited in a shallow depression, which we then filled with the stones. After 2 hours, with the wood all but burnt out, we covered the pile of baking hot stones with a mattress of luxurious Gobi sand. The Princess and the Pea came to mind.
What about my nose?
The temperature was slightly lower than my deep freeze at home, which I wouldn't dream of sleeping in.
How often have you done this?
Not often, yeah.
Not often. That wasn't what I wanted to hear. Well, I'd be very impressed if we're still alive tomorrow morning. These stones are just extraordinary. I have to keep turning over every 15 minutes because, I mean, this side of me's almost done now. Like my calves, they're actually burning. I'm having to keep them above the surface. They are amazingly effective, these stones. Oh, I've just got to turn that, it's too hot. Too hot.
The next morning we were back on the road for another dose of Mongolian osteopathy.
I'm freezing now, I can hardly speak. You're a madman, Aldra.
Yes.
Mongolia is the size of Western Europe, but with only about 3 million people living here, it is, apart from the polar regions, the emptiest place on the planet. And this southern part of it, the Gobi Desert, is the emptiest part of all. On my way to meet up with Bruno Baumann on the other side of the Gobi, we travelled south all day without coming across anyone, until we got to the Biga Valley, where we met Shabata and his family.
Nick, how do you do?
Living in pretty much the same way as the followers of Genghis Khan 800 years ago, minus the raping and pillaging, of course, Shabata's family are pastoral nomads. But they sit out the winter close to a supply of water, with their herds of camels, goats and cows. When we arrived, Shabata was about to get the family's daily water.
I'm very lazy. All I have to do is turn a tap.
He seemed unimpressed by the joys of Western plumbing.
Yeah. Yeah. Just 2 buckets is not so heavy.
It seems like quite a big effort to me.
The river Biga dries up in summer, but though it flows all winter, getting at the water isn't easy.
How thick is the ice here?
About 1 meter.
A metre thick?
Okay.
Gosh.
For the 5 months of the year when the river's frozen, this isn't just for Shabata's family. Their animals would die if he didn't break the ice fall.
Yeah.
Water.
Look at that. Yes. It's like a geyser.
Yeah.
It's filling up.
The water looked a bit muddy for humans, but it was nothing a little settling time wouldn't sort out, and the livestock certainly didn't care. Back in the camp, Shabata and his son-in-law kindly erected their guest ger for me and Aldra. In just 30 minutes. Doors for the warm ger.
Shabata, I've brought you a special present from England, which is English snuff.
Forewarned about the Mongols' love of snuff, I'd brought along a supply of Oxford's finest.
Thank you. Huh? It's strong.
It's quite strong, is it?
Yeah,
it's stronger than Mongolian snuff.
I'm not sure the snuff was all that popular, but at that moment the giant Mongolian kebab appeared. It was served, you've guessed it, hot stones first.
It is very effective for your venue tightness, yeah?
When you're tired?
Yeah.
Oh,
when you're
okay.
done. Yeah. You can just try
Thank you.
this.
They're not too hot either, are they?
Yeah.
I mean, they're quite hot. You wouldn't want to hold them in one hand for very long.
Once Delgashot had fed the fire with the first piece of meat, Aldrar and I were told to dig in.
Which are the best bits?
Skinnier.
Yeah, skin is good, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's delicious. Lots of fat on this meat.
It's a nomad animal, so you can eat.
You need to eat the whole lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, fat is good for you in
Yes,
the cold,
yeah,
isn't it?
in hot winter.
Yeah. I must say I like fat.
With most of the Gobi ahead of me, it seemed only wise to fill up on the mouth-wateringly fatty, stone-cooked goat. And it was late when we collapsed into our gare. Next morning, Delgashot lost no time in chiding me for a basic laundry error.
Perhaps I should put them inside, yeah. Right.
And my smalls weren't the only thing to be frozen. At minus 32 degrees Celsius, engine oil freezes.
Yes, engine is frozen. Last night, very cold.
Yeah, it was. Aren't you ever afraid that it might sort of explode or something?
No.
No?
Eventually, however, we said our goodbyes and set off. Our next stop, 6 hours later, was the Takintal Equine Research Centre, where Aldrar and I were to part company. At Takintal, Przewalski's horse, known to Mongolians as the Taki, the last wild relative of the domestic horse, is being reintroduced to the steppes. Genghis Khan's hordes would have been familiar with herds of these untamable Taki, but they became extinct in the wild in the 1960s. The watchful Ganbata is in charge of the process, and I was hoping to get a lift further south with him as he checked up on the centre's biggest success story.
Are there any groups that you would say are now truly wild again?
Yes, our past group is really could come back to truly wild life.
Past group?
Yes, past group.
So what's special about the past group?
He is best adapted to the wild life. Past is very experienced stallion. He can protect his foals from wolf.
And where does he hang out?
Yeah, this group is very far distance from here, approximately 50-kilometer distance.
Without further ado, we climbed into a jeep and set off. Ganbata explained that the resourceful Pass and his harem of mares and foals roamed over a vast area, 25 to 30 kilometers square. It was like looking for a pale brown needle in a pale brown haystack.
We'll
Okay.
try sedan.
Come on, you Taki.
Yeah, come on.
Well, all I can see
You can see?
is lots of stones. Proper Gobi, huh? Proper Gobi, but no Taki.
As the search continued, we sought what local help there was. This lady said she'd seen some wild donkeys 6 weeks ago, but no Taki. But this man said he'd seen Pass just a little further south. And sure enough, just as the sun was setting,
Nick, I see Pass. Pass group is there.
That's it.
Yes, that's his Pass. There we are very lucky. Did you see stallion?
Which one is the stallion?
Stallion is 100-meter distance from group. Usually Taki stallion always...
Oh, yes, okay.
Yeah,
Right to
this
this
is
side.
Pass. He's a special horse.
Standing
This is-
guard over his
Yes.
harem.
it was slightly scary to see an animal from prehistory roaming unconcernedly across the frozen steppes, for it had taken it thousands of years to acclimatize to this environment, yet I had only a matter of days to prepare for the Badain Jiran. The next leg of my journey was a bit of a dogleg, but since I was in the general region, I couldn't resist the opportunity of seeing the Turpan Depression, the second lowest place on Earth after the Dead Sea.
This means Turpan, hiding lake. Hiding means as a night, have moonlight. In the dark, something is like light, like moonlight. Yes.
Moonlight Lake.
Yes, yes, yes.
Turpan.
Yeah.
Excellent.
This Moonlight Lake is in fact a vast salt pan, 154 meters below sea level, covering the bottom of the Turpan Depression. The depression itself was formed by a ripple of the same vast tectonic event that created all the mountains and deserts of Central Asia. 50 million years ago, the crustal plate of India collided with Eurasia. Over the millennia, as the plate continued to push north, it threw up the Himalayas, the Karakorums, and further north, the Tien Shan and Altai mountains. The Turpan Depression somehow got forced down. This same event also created the climate of the area, for as the Himalayas rose, so they cut off the moisture-laden monsoon air from the south, and what had been savanna turned into impassable desert. Turpan has an average annual rainfall of just 16 millimeters, so it was something of a surprise when Amina, my new guide, said the region had been a famous oasis since the earliest days of the Silk Road, particularly renowned for its wine. In January, the principal evidence of this fertility in the villages surrounding the depression was masses of fruit trees, all bare of leaves, and rows of vines buried in mounds of soil to protect them from the cold. But the strangest thing about Turpan is where it gets its water from. The fields are irrigated by water from aquifers some 40 kilometers to the north, channeled here in an ancient network of tunnels known as karez. Amina took me to the head of one of the myriad maintenance shafts along the length of the tunnels to meet Rupa. He heads a team of karezjes who, like moles, spend all day down in the tunnels keeping the water flowing. The tunnels run at incredible depths. I wasn't about to go down to find out, but you can tell a lot from a falling rock.
Very deep, 50 meters.
Thank you.
Some chupacabza.
Pretty deep. Yeah.
He said, you go deep, try. How is deep? Do you go yourself?
Me?
Yeah,
Well, go down there.
yeah, he's saying.
No, thank you very much. Tell him thank you very much.
Rahmet
I'm quite happy watching from the top.
Şey şu körpak korkma.
He wants me to go down.
Everybody wants you going.
Next thing I knew, a pair of waders appeared.
Spare pair of these. That's lucky, isn't it?
If I had to go, Amina was too,
You could be the first Uyghur woman to descend the Karez. What do you think?
but she deferred to a higher authority.
He said, women and go down, cars water stop.
Sıcağın erler dışında o ayarlar düşüyor.
Before I knew what was happening, Rupa had me in the waders and a hard hat, being lowered on this precarious rig deep into the unknown.
Hey, these Gobi rocks go all the way down. It's three-dimensional Gobi.
How is you feeling?
My glasses are fogging up.
These hand-dug karez are ancient. The idea of burrowing out water tunnels came along the Silk Road from the Persians 2,000 years ago.
I don't think I like this. Gosh, it's extraordinary.
There's no way I could do Rupa's job working this deep underground. He keeps the water flowing by clearing out all the debris that falls from the tunnel roof.
Blimey. I wouldn't want to be down here in an earthquake.
This astonishing engineering feat, started 2,000 years ago, is necessary because of the extremely hot summer temperatures here, which would evaporate any water flowing in surface canals long before it reached the villages. I really didn't fancy being hoisted up the shaft again on that rickety cable, so Rupa said I could walk down the Karez all the way to his village. Apparently, if I followed my nose, I couldn't go wrong. But with 50 meters of unsupported sand and rock above my head, I was distinctly nervous.
This way to the Garden of Eden. I'm not so sure. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
See you at the other end. I hope. And it's getting narrower, like going into an Egyptian tomb. Really messy place now. Just keep going.
Rupa swore this tunnel ended in 2 kilometers. I was praying he was right, because there are 5,000 kilometers of these carrés around Turpan, enough to reach from here to Istanbul. After what seemed like an eternity, it was probably no more than 20 minutes, the tunnel opened up and the gaps in the roof showed I was getting close to ground level.
Yeah, nearly there.
It felt good to see the sky again.
Hello. Are you all right?
Yeah. A bit tired, but I made it.
After my underground heebie-jeebies, we sat down to a feast of apricots, melon, nuts and raisins. I could see how Turpan must have been a fantastic service station on the barren Silk Route, a place where some of the wealth of the caravans was exchanged for vital sustenance. The phenomenal labor of carving out and maintaining the carrés was the price the locals paid to keep the travelers coming back. Finally, it was time to sample the celebrated Turpan wine.
The smell is beautiful.
Yeah, I try first.
Amina explained why it didn't taste like French wine.
Like a grape juice, not like wine.
It isn't wine.
Yeah.
Not alcoholic.
No, this is
Okay.
made from grape juice. Pigeon?
Sorry?
Pigeon. Bird, pigeon. I try.
Shall I try?
Yeah.
Okay, to the carers cleaners.
Hoş devla.
Push. Doesn't taste like pigeon at all, does it? Tastes very good, actually.
Fueled by pigeon wine, I headed east 1,000 kilometers to the Badain Jiran, and where I was rendezvousing with Bruno Baumann. Bruno is the only Western man to have ever crossed this sand sea unsupported on foot. He did it years ago, and he very nearly died. He'd run out of water and collapsed from exhaustion. Amazingly, his life had then been saved by Lao Gao. Bruno was on a mission to thank his saviour and had agreed to take me along with him. We met at a tiny village on the southern edge of the dunes, and the brand spanking new Jeep made it clear that Bruno was not going to be risking the foot option again.
A little greeting. Here is one very isolated inhabitants, and it would be very nice to get.
However, Shu, the driver, seemed very unhappy about taking the Jeep across these Himalayas of sand.
No. 不可以。 爬山。
But Bruno is nothing if not persistent, and he finally persuaded Shu to try a route that would avoid the worst of the dunes.
这个可以。
Bruno's mission was to take Lao Gao a present to thank him for saving his life. A tough gift to choose, I felt. But hand delivery to the middle of the Badain Jiran certainly counted for something.
So how big an area do these dunes cover, Bruno?
It's a big sand desert within the Gobi.
Yeah. And the biggest of these mega dunes are what sort of height?
The biggest I have measured was 430 meters. I think it's beyond any sand dune you can find anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it?
As we careered up and down mere 10-meter dunes, I suddenly began to sympathize with Shu, the driver. I didn't see how we were going to make it. I was 5 hours into my journey to meet Lao Gao in the heart of the Badain-Jiran Sand Sea, and our jeep was, against the odds, handling the conditions. Badain-Jiran means celestial lakes, which is an odd name for a vast area of sand dunes until you suddenly encounter one of these extraordinary blue lakes. With only 40 millimeters of rain a year, they're definitely not formed by local precipitation. They're fed by freshwater springs whose origins are unknown. Fierce summer temperatures mean much of the water evaporates, so like the Dead Sea, many of them are very salty. But they are what make life possible in this surreal wilderness. By late afternoon, the jeep was struggling, and Bruno and I were beginning to have our doubts.
你可以不可以爬上那个沙漠？爬上可以吗？可以吗？
Not so Shu.
He thinks he can make it. He thinks.
Well, it's the thought that counts.
With ever softer sand and ever steeper dunes, it was becoming clear that 21st century technology simply wasn't up to it. Finally, despite the loss of face, Shu threw in the towel.
Huh?
We were 60 kilometers into the desert, and Shu was taking his jeep back to solid ground, with or without us.
It's not going to happen, is it?
I was all for going back in the jeep, but Bruno still had his present to deliver 40 kilometers away. And, somewhat reluctantly, I threw in my lot with him. The sun was getting low, and as I was wondering how on earth we'd find shelter in this endless sea of sand, Bruno came up trumps. We arrived at the 18th century Buddhist temple of Alashan Miao.
How long have you been coming to?
After a sleep, troubled by dreams of being lost in a vast sand sea with a mad Austrian adventurer, I woke up to find it was true. We would need camels if we were to complete our journey to Lao Gao, and Bruno was pinning his hopes on the llama. Since persuading llamas to organize camel trains isn't my forte, I let Bruno do all the talking. It transpired that this llama had a rather 19th century approach to life. His eldest son had followed him into the church, while the younger one had gone into trade as a camel driver. Bruno's powers of persuasion finally paid off.
We get the 3 camels here.
Oh, we can get some camels.
They could only spare 3 camels, which meant we'd be going on foot while the camels carried the bags. It would be slow and hard work in the soft sand, but Ha Su, our rather shy camel driver, thought we could reach Lao Gao in 2 or 3 days.
I asked them if they can climb. He said yes.
No problem.
Very confident.
Straight
Very
up.
confident.
Excellent. Just the camels we need.
I could understand why Buddhist monks seeking spiritual seclusion might have built a monastery here. But as we trudged on, seeing no sign of life whatsoever, I still couldn't work out why anyone else would want to live in this astonishing place. I also found it hard to imagine there was enough work for Ha Su and his ships of the desert. But he said they kept busy, and besides, the camels provided more than one revenue stream.
They can get from the wool 1,000 yuan.
1,000 yuan. That's about 60 pounds.
Yeah.
100 US dollars.
I couldn't help wondering how many second-hand car salesmen Ha Su's herd would keep in coats. Most dunes are soft and permanently shifting, but the monsters here have reached this height because they're built on layers of solidified sand.
This is what I was talking about, Bruno.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard. Yeah. It's solid. Yeah.
During occasional wet periods over the millennia, Calcium blown up from the lakes combined with rain and sand to make a cement-like crust. This stabilized the sand beneath and provided a base for the next layer of wind-blown sand. It's this sandwiching process that's created the sand dunes.
Every step reveals something new. Yeah.
To be honest, I'd rather lost interest in the view. Getting up and down these monster dunes was all I could focus on. That and the fact that since the sun was rapidly setting, the temperature had dropped to minus 10 degrees centigrade.
So where's Hasu going to sleep?
Hasu sleeps in his blanket and his fur coat.
Hasu, despite living in China, was clearly a real Mongolian. Indeed, without any hot rocks, he must have been even tougher than Aldra. Not so me and Bruno.
I have to admit, I found today quite hard going.
I'm sorry to say that today that was like go for a walk compared.
Easy.
Yeah, compared to the
Start easy.
get up to the mega.
The next morning, we sent Hasu ahead with the camels to set up camp just a few kilometers further on. We were surrounded by the sand dunes, and I'd realized that any travel writer worth their salt would have to get to the top of one of them.
Choose from around here.
Oh yeah, let's see.
That one.
Got few.
That one there.
That is a big one.
That one.
That is a big one.
And that one over there.
That's the highest one there.
If you're going to climb a big dune, you might as well know how big it is. So first up, we took an altitude reading at the base.
1,237 meters. How high do you reckon it is? Your guess?
I guess it's 350 meter.
350?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not quite as confident as that. I reckon 295.
Oh.
And what's riding on this? Come on, Bruno, you must have a lot of money in a Swiss bank somewhere.
Oh God. If you just
Okay,
stick me on that,
a
it's
bottle of
difficult.
whiskey.
Yeah.
Bottle of whiskey.
A bottle of whiskey with you.
Okay,
Yeah.
right, you're on.
There was no way we were going to make it straight up the sheer slip face, so Bruno picked a route which took us up the ridges. We'd known this would be a tough climb, but it was much more grueling than either of us had expected.
The sand is so soft. Even on the ridges. Even on the ridges, you can't go anywhere, you know?
I
You can't find a firm.
I know, it's desperate, isn't it? You think you're going somewhere, but half the time you're not.
Yeah. Here, one step up, half back.
Yeah. But it'll be worth it.
Next time I climb a Gobi mega dune, remind me to bring my ski poles.
I've been reduced to the status of a four-legged small animal, Bruno, just to get up there
yeah, I
without
see.
sticks.
But we try to get the ridge now. Maybe you can get up.
It was at this stage that Bruno revealed a rather annoying habit. He had tried to encourage me by saying we were nearly there,
I can see the final ridge,
only to slap me down in the next breath.
but it's still a lot of way to go.
I can
Very
see it.
difficult.
I'm going to have to crawl to the summit.
That was said in jest, but this final slope was so steep that without poles, all fours was the only way to make any progress upwards at all.
It's real killer. It's really soft sand.
Now, if you look around, they are moved all deeper now. The other mountains,
They are.
sand mountains.
They're nothing, aren't they?
This is the big one. I think that's the highest point. Careful, Bruno.
Oh, yeah, otherwise
We're rolling down. We're rolling down sooner than we wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
So let's see. Hey, you know what? This says 5,000 feet.
Yeah, let's see
What was it down there?
what the GPS says.
5,000 feet, and at the bottom it was 3,800. Well, that is almost 350 meters.
I'd lost the bottle of whiskey, but I didn't care. On top of one of the biggest sand dunes in the world, the only way is down.
I can't stop! I can't stop, Bruno! I can't stop!
The next morning was day 3 of our journey to Lao Gao and his house in the middle of the Badain-Geran Sand Sea. Overnight, the weather had taken a turn for the worse, and a biting wind had blown up a sandstorm.
I don't see anything else than sand, you?
No, actually. Sand wherever I look.
Dust from the Gobi has been found 6,000 kilometers away in Alaska. On a day like today, it felt like it could make it anywhere on the planet.
We just stopped here for a spot of lunch in a relatively wind-free zone, but even so, there's been a lot of sand with it, and it's crunching in my teeth as I speak. Really hard going, and the wind is biting most of the time, and it really is as if the demons are saying I shouldn't be here.
After lunch, the wind dropped, but the going got even tougher.
I think now the next couple of kilometers for us, the most difficult, I would say, in the whole desert.
Really?
Yeah.
The four-legged Iron Man pressed on relentlessly, but I was beginning to regret abandoning Shu and his lovely Jeep.
How many more of these?
One more. There is the track.
There's always one more with you.
Oh.
Oh. Really tired.
Yeah.
Finally, as we reached a vast depression, Bruno said the words I'd been longing to hear.
If we move on a little further, we will see his house.
But once we got down onto the flat, Bruno realized he'd got it wrong.
Depressed. Because it's not Lao Gao.
Not again.
No, it's the previous depression. One before. And we have to climb that small little hill. I mean, not really little.
Small little
I'm
hill,
underestimating, but
day,
we have to get over. No other way.
But you said about 7 times. This is it.
Yeah. I was also hoping, you know, and sometimes the hope is moving in front. And the reality is back. I can promise you now, once we cross that mountain, you will see the paradise. Come on.
His stream of feeble excuses didn't make me feel any better. In fact, I have to admit, I had a bit of a sense of humor failure.
Never walked across this bloody desert with an Austrian.
As we toiled up the next ridge, the thought occurred to me that what we didn't even know was whether Lao Gao was going to be in.
That must be the view of heaven. Yoo-hoo! Lao Gao! Lao Gao!
I can't actually see a house, Bruno.
Yeah, you see, that's him.
Do you know, I'm only going to believe it when I actually arrive. I wait till I got that cup of tea in my hand.
Lao Gao! Ni hao, ni hao, ni hao, ni hao, ni hao, ni hao. Ni hao, Lao Banyo. Very old friend.
I'm sorry to say that after walking from dawn to beyond dusk and a few false arrivals, far from matching Bruno's glee at seeing his saviour, I was possibly a bit surly.
Nick, Ingoman.
I'm glad to see you exist, lad.
Asu, Nick, let's go in.
I'm very, very, very tired. I wanted to get on the camel, I admit that. I would have got on the camel, but I left it to the end where the slopes were too steep. So I couldn't. I had to keep walking. But we made it.
The next morning, after 11 hours uninterrupted slumber, I finally got to ask Lao Gao the question that had been troubling me since I'd first heard about him.
Why did you come to this desert? And why come to this piece of desert?
水种主要呀，水这个人生活啊，这个蔬菜啊、分析啊，你这个水就不行。
He says it's very good here. The living conditions for
Well, yes, I can see that. But how did he know that before he came?
They came from Gansu province, and at that time the life was very big poverty.
Really?
Yeah.
It was hard in Gansu?
Yeah.
Blimey, it must have been hard there to come to here.
Yeah. It must have been straight from here.
Extraordinary.
Later, I worked out that his family were probably refugees from the Great Leap Forward famine of 1959. But Lao Gao clearly loved his life here because he never seemed to stop smiling.
But why this particular spot?
It's the water, Nick, that made them live here. It's much better than other ones that sold you.
Yeah.
Like the nomads in the Biga Valley and the Carez builders of Turpan, unfrozen water is the key to survival in a freezing desert. With a permanent supply of sweet well water, the family's herds of camels and goats had prospered, and their manure had fertilized the thin and sandy soil. But as Lao Gao showed us round his kitchen garden, I could scarcely believe it supported his entire family, currently 7 strong, year-round.
The soil seems really fine. Does he have a problem with it blowing away?
Lao Gao explained that his windbreaks and the trees provided enough shelter. But, as if sensing my disbelief that this was a functioning garden, he took me to his winter store and proudly showed me the remains of last year's harvest.
Oh, yes. It's your own deep freeze. See, lots of onions, bottles of hooch. What are those things? Pumpkins? Excellent. You can keep going for the whole Gobi winter.
I kept on having to pinch myself to remember that I'd walked 3 days across sand dunes to get here. We were in the middle of nowhere, but Lao Gao behaved as if he were living at number 34 Acacia Avenue, with solar-powered electricity and even satellite television. He wasn't just surviving here, he was thriving. The camels and sheep that he bred to sell at market may not have had the richest of grazing, but it was certainly extensive. Later that evening, Lao Gao treated us, alongside his large and extended family, to the bounty of his garden. And his homemade hooch was clearly the most important thing for us to sample.
Cheers.
Cheers. That's the Mongolian way. You have to do it.
It was pretty good for a home brew, and once you'd had one, it was easy to go for another.
Very much. How often does he have guests dropping in like this?
2 times per month he get visitors.
Twice a month? Gosh.
That seemed like an extraordinary amount of traffic for this particular Acacia Avenue.
I don't suppose many of those are from Europe, are they?
You mean me?
One European visitor came through here over 700 years ago. Marco Polo in his travels along the Silk Road, and I think he was served the same food. It's now thought he probably didn't introduce pasta to Italy. But the dumplings Lao Gao's daughter was making were unmistakably tortelloni. So maybe he brought back a recipe or two.
Gobi.
With the fruits of Lao Gao's personal distillery flowing,
This is strong stuff.
it wasn't long before Bruno lost the ability to translate.
What was all that, Bruno?
Some speech I could not speak.
Welcome.
After 3 of that, I'm sorry.
Welcome and have a nice day.
And I invented a new international language. Next morning, Bruno assembled the family for a ceremony.
Lao Gao, Bogini,
Jagger. Did you know? I try to guess him what it is.
To repay his 7-year-old life-saving debt to Lao Gao, he had brought, all the way from Graz, a pair of the finest German precision-optic camel-searching binoculars.
你看那骆驼，看你看，你看骆驼，哟，好不好？好，很好。
Lao Gao seemed overjoyed with them.
He seemed really happy with that.
Yeah. I think now even when he gets older, the eye is not so good.
Yes.
He has the sharp eyes.
Yeah.
He will find his
Still
camels.
able to find his camels.
Huh? Hi, Simon. How about?
As we left for the long march back to jeeps and civilization, I realized that despite the Badain Jiran, and indeed the whole Gobi Desert, providing a generous living, at least in the places where there was access to water, for me, 3 days to the nearest corner shop was always going to be too far.
Na de onderbreking volgen we Nick tijdens de volgende etappe van zijn reis langs de eeuwenoude zijderoute en komen we aan in Kazachstan.